So welcome back to, and here's the thing, because I've renamed the podcast since you were last on, Samaj. Now it's called Chasing Common Ground. So when you were
Love it.
last on the show, it was called The Lifestyle Chase.
Hmm.
And I found that if I brought on a guest that didn't really know me, they'd be calling me Chase. And I was like,
Mm.
I was like, but I can see how that is deceptive. So then I was like, okay, let's look at the drawing board. And I figured chasing common ground, what I like especially about that is because I don't always just stick to fitness professionals. And I don't always kind of like, I try not to be in an echo chamber. There's been times that I've noticed that I kind of put myself in an echo chamber, but I like to have different conversations and I like to kind of like step outside of fitness sometimes.
Totally.
Um, And so, as I'm kind of diving into this, I want to give a shout out to Joan. So, Samaj, Joan is one of the people that I work with. She's based in Michigan, and she has listened to every episode from episode one to like episode 150 or something. So, she has heard you appear on the podcast at least twice. So now she gets the excitement of being able to hear where your life is at now, which is also exciting for me because we didn't waste too much time with banter before we hit record. So now I get to pass the microphone on to you, Samaj. Give us the update. What's been happening over the last, I think it's been like 2 years or something since you've last been on the show. So bringing us up to speed.
Yeah, man. 2 years ago, what were we talking about 2 years ago? We're going into what, 2022. I had probably just come back to the States and I was figuring things out. So around then I had traveled through Mexico for probably about 6 months at the time. That's actually what happened. I think you reached out and you were like, I need to hear like what this whole thing is about that you're currently doing. And me and my wife were trying to figure out where we were going to land. So we kind of ventured through a couple different states and landed on North Carolina as a place that we were going to move to. Ended up moving out to Charlotte. Um, Spent about a year there trying to actually we were there for 2 years trying to like navigate. All right, well, is this home? Are we going to plant some roots around here? We like North Carolina a lot. It's 4 seasons. We don't have to deal with the snow also, so that's a nice plus. And I call it 4 seasons personally because it gets cold. It gets at least to 30, so I think I can call that 4 seasons. Um and then we ended up moving up to Raleigh, Durham, so about 2 hours north of the city of Charlotte, and we have been here for just a couple months. In that time, we also had our first child. So, like entering pretty much like both feet into fatherhood and trying to navigate what it looks like to work, be in, manage my own business, raise our daughter, be the family man, just be very present, but also kind of being in this online space as well. And also taking care of myself in the process. So navigating my own health and being able to better help my clients who are dealing with their health, their wellness, and also trying to raise a family and be present in that way also. So yeah, that's been the big things. I think I've been away from the internet for a little bit and I've kind of come back in both feet trying to reconnect and see what's going on. I feel like the terrain has changed a little bit. What has been true probably a year ago, the pendulum has swung in some cases, and the folks who are, as you put it, finding common ground, like those folks are still somewhat in the middle, I think. And we're not. I don't think we're saying just it depends anymore, but hey, like you can probably go about this a bunch of different ways. It's kind of choose your own journey at this point.
Exactly. So there's a question that I've asked a few people and the responses varied. But the question is, what is it like being a dad?
What is it like being a dad? So it's a good question. I I think I was always built to be a dad. Like it wasn't surprising. It wasn't like, oh man, like I've had this new identity that I'm trying to discover. I have three younger brothers, the youngest who is 18 years younger than I am. So I've been around infants, kids, like most of my adolescent to adult life. And it was just like, oh, okay, like I'm I know what it's like. I'm not in a rush to get there. I just want to make sure that all of these things are in place. I'm clear on who I am before kind of bringing a child like into life, into this world. So, um, what is it like? It's a lot of the same except 10 times. So my personality is probably just kind of a little bit more ingrained. I'm a little less apologetic. I'm a little bit more protective of my time. I'm a very much more protective of my energy. And outside of like my family, I think everything else comes second. I think it's probably put into perspective what matters, and probably more importantly, the things that don't. And that list of things that don't matter has become extraordinarily long.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And as you say that, I just want to recognize that I appreciate that you were able to come on the show because I've even noticed like shifts with like um every time somebody can't make it on the show, I completely understand because it's like we're going into a period of life where there's so many other things going on. And so that's been a big part of why I've done a lot more solo episodes because it's cool to put some messages out there. And it's just that, like, sometimes you just only momentarily get to have these connections with people because everybody's lives are changing. Everybody is getting older together. And so we're all going through new seasons, we're all going through new life things, and things are evolving. But I'm kind of curious into some of maybe the introspection you may have had during your offline periods of time because you definitely like I was like, where is Samaj? Like I can't even is he posting? I hope he's good. And then you'd come back and you were just crushing it, and then you disappear and then you come back again. So like what kind of stuff did you experience during those times?
Yeah. I probably absorbed um, an amount of content that was around um, what it means to be online. I think that there's a lot of noise happening online. And I find that a lot of folks end up kind of being this like slave to the algorithm, right? I did something that got eyeballs, likes, attention, shares, things like that, and now I have to keep doing it, and they essentially become a dancing monkey. Um, I was very nervous about leaning into that because I knew I wanted to expand my family. I knew I wanted to do this thing, and I didn't want this other like important thing, what it seemed like at the time, pulling at me. So I needed to kind of gauge myself. And that's nothing to say like everyone is has their own kind of journey when it comes to this stuff. Like this was just my personal one. So I wanted to make sure that every time I did come back that I had my perspectives kind of in order. Why am I here? What am I doing? Who am I helping? I could lie to myself and say like every post I make, if it helps one person, that's great. But if I don't honestly feel that, like I have to ask myself why? Like why isn't it fine if it helps one person and one person makes a change? Um and if it really is, like I should be able to step away. I shouldn't be like refreshing a page and looking to see like how is it doing? Like I should be able to kind of put the information out there and at least to some degree walk away from it and compartmentalize that. So I spent some time just kind of working on myself with that and trying to figure out like, hey, what's going on? What is important to you? Like realigning overall like my mission, my my identity, my values, what's actually the thing that's going to drive me at this moment in time. And so every time I did come back, like you kind of peek behind the curtain and you're like, yep, there's still a bunch of crap that's going on out here. So not very exciting to kind of like
Hmm.
step back into it. And at the same time, like when it came to the clients that I'm working with, I have some awesome clients. And so I wanted to make sure that on the back end, my business was great. Like having a really good like curb appeal front facade situation is awesome. You get a lot of people into your funnel, I guess. Um, but I didn't want folks to come in and realize like, oh yeah, it's nice on the outside, but you get here and I'm not actually getting what I was promised. I wanted to kind of like work backwards a little bit, make sure that my product, my service was really good, that who I was on the outside was very matched up with who I could be on the inside of my business. Because I've also seen that with friends who they've built awesome businesses, but they become so thinly pulled that they can't possibly be the same person. inside of their business. Their business has become the thing that rules them. And maybe that's the kind of like message that I've constantly been pulling at. Like, can I avoid making this thing a ruler, a god, something that I serve versus something that serves me and the work that I'm trying to do?
I like that. Now, it brings me to something that I'm curious about. Like
Mhm.
for myself, when I'm offline, I'm looking for inspiration in all kinds of areas. I'm listening to books on Audible. I'm diving into non-fitness podcasts. I'm having conversations with people, going for walks. So for you, what are some of the things that stand out in your mind as you reflect on like what are your sources? What are your books that you like?
Yeah, so so this is actually very different. I am a consumer when it comes to information, and I can do that to a fault at some points. So this probably the last 6 months to a year, I've slowed down consumption. I've probably consumed less and worked on like, okay, well, what do I want to produce? What do I want to create? And do I have the information already to create it? Like, is there a note somewhere that has the things scribbled on it that I just like left to die in the corner of a notebook? And I've been pulling at a lot of that stuff. If there's anything that I've been doing in terms of like continuing to upskill, like I'm meeting people in person. So probably the last couple years, I trained out in Charlotte. I was training with Nick Shaw from RP. So he just awesome individual to just be around, very down to earth, and being able to just like have that kind of communication back and forth. And we're talking about like nothing crazy, but seeing that balance and seeing like someone who is at that place in a business, but also willing to just shoot the shit essentially.
Yeah,
Like he's just a very down to earth individual. It was a very cool thing to see in my mind and to kind of set a tone for me of like, okay, well, what am I trying to build here for myself? um Going to events. I just came back from the Super Coach Summit by Coach Catalyst. Awesome event. So just meeting people in person, sitting down, being able to like shake hands, rub elbows with influential people in the industry, but also just friends that I've made over the years. Being able to sit next to folks like Jeb, and like again, like very great individual in the field, and also just a down to earth, like amazing human being. And those are probably where I've been most influenced in the last year of like, okay, how do I want to build this thing? Because I think the pieces, like the raw material is there. And I could dive into another book or another podcast. And at some point it's just kind of like reiterating all of the things that I already know. And it's like, all right,
hmm
well, what's still in my way? Like what are the problems that I want to solve for people, and where is that coming in? And for me personally, it's a relationship side of things. So I've dove into a bit more in terms of the relationship stuff. Like, hey, how can I foster some really, really good relationships? And that's probably what kind of also sparked me, like just reaching out and saying, like, "Hey, I know I've avoided some of these conversations, like getting online, but I'm actually ready to kind of dive back into let's talk. Let's
hmm
like connect because as you like again, the spirit of your podcast, common ground. I think we're living in a time where it's like really easy to just nitpick at everything, and finding common ground is like almost the buzzy thing to do. It's like how did you find fault in common ground? Like let's actually try to build that because that's how we move forward. It's how we build something really, really cool.
Absolutely. And like I was happy to see that you were able to go to more events and conferences. First question that I have is how did you connect with Nick Shaw? Like not to be Snoopy, I just like that is such a cool training environment. Like for anybody who does not know who that is, like that's huge. And to see like the humility and to see just like being a bro kind of thing, I was like, man, life is great. Like there's so many things we can do.
Yeah, I mean, I like I can't say it's hard work. Like I'm just fortunate. Like I'm blessed. I was in the right place at the right time. I don't think there's a huge base of people in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was a part of the team Full group that RP has put out. Like if you're a coach that is looking into nutrition, you're looking into any kind of like bodybuilding style training, it's an awesome group. Check it out. I learned a lot in that group, and I asked a bunch of questions. I was really active there, and I think at some point there was a seminar that was going on, and he invited a couple of us out to come listen to the seminar and lift, and it was history. Like we just connected really
Hmm.
well, and so like from there, this is like an industry of like if you know if you know one good person, I think people will easily share your name. Like we're not gatekeeping. The folks who
No.
are here that have been in the industry for a long time are not gatekeeping. It's like if you want to be introduced to someone and you know someone they know, it's likely going to happen if you go to some of these events. And so I think based on the relationships that I've been able to build within the field, it's also something that can kind of give me a little street cred, so to speak, right? It's like, who is this guy? Oh, he knows this person, this person, this person. He's been here, here, and here, or he like posts on like in this forum and that forum, and he generally says good things. He's not starting crap, and so I think it probably gave me a little bit of backing to say, okay, he's not a weirdo. Like you can come lift with us a couple times, and like, okay, I guess you can stay.
Well, I mean, I think anybody who had the opportunity to hang out with you would enjoy it because, and this is kind of something that I talked about in one of my solo episodes, just basically like sometimes how we are presenting ourselves does not match up with our desired outcome. And I used an analogy, and I don't know if this got me some unsubscribes, but the analogy was basically like when somebody's setting up like a dating profile, a lot of the time they'll bring up like their bad experiences with people in the past. And by doing that, it discourages people who could provide a different outcome from even like reaching out to them or approaching them. And it's just like that's just the science of the psychology of it all. And I was like, I really thought of it. I was like, okay. So now if I apply this to fitness industry stuff, like there's tons of scenarios where I'm like, what am I doing here? Like I should be like in some box gym just like making minimum wage. Like I'm just a new guy and I'm not a new guy, but I still feel that way frequently. And so I can identify very quickly that you bring like a positive energy. Like that's why when I'll talk about like times where I'm like, I want to do a road trip across North America and go hang out with people. I'm not like gonna hang out with everybody because some people I just get this impression that if I was with them, I'd just be miserable and hate my life. But if I feel I get this impression, I have this strong feeling that if I hung out with you, we go for a walk, we get some food, go for a lift. Maybe I help you move a couch, like whatever. We just do whatever because it'd just be good times. And so I can only imagine the number of people that you've encountered where they would get the exact same vibe. And so for people listening to that part, I'm hoping that the thing that they get from this is if they want more from life, a lot of that onus is on them in how they're showing up. And like sometimes while they might be very upset about something that happened to them or upset about something that they see on the internet, projecting that on people as a way to right a wrong doesn't do anything. It doesn't help them. It doesn't help the other person. It's completely unproductive. However, I have a segue so that you get a turn to talk. So the segue is, let's say you were just riled up, upset about something. Something was just like making you think like, how can it be this way? Like we're better than this. What do you do to process that and then be able to keep putting out positivity?
That's a good question. Man, you're coming in hot. I think kind of tying it back to the what has changed since becoming a father. I don't have enough space for the negativity. It's not something that I hold. That in combination with have less expectations for people. I think like, they say like never meet your heroes. It's not because like all heroes are bad. It's because people hold them to such high pedestals. It's like I expect so much from you. And we live in this culture of take, take, take. And we even take the stuff we don't need. It's like we take on the the ideas of who we are from the people around us or from the comments or from whatever, it's social, like we're online at this point. We take the perception of our biggest failures, like we absolutely ignore sometimes our greatest successes. And then we also will like really adopt these, I think, ideas and expectations for the people around us because of it. I think if we were to reduce expectations and try to consume less from people, like I'm not here to take anymore. Maybe at some point I was. I'm here to give. And whether the the soil is ready, I'm still probably here to give. Like I want to leave a room a little bit better than I walked into it. I want to leave a situation, a conversation, a relationship, enter a relationship even, and just be able to change the atmosphere in a positive way. And not because of me, not like, oh, let's take on the the cape and like let's go save the day type of situation. But I already know that there's a lot of crap that's out there. And if there's any way that I can somewhat balance the scales a little bit, I think that I'm okay with that. And because I don't have the expectations, I think I can just kind of walk away and be like, all right, cool. Like,
Hmm.
did I make a huge impact? I have no clue. I no longer consider like, did I help one person? If it sounds nice. Like, if I could help one person, that would be great. But it's like, what if you helped no one? Like, is that still okay? And what if you helped everyone? Does that make you somewhat better than the person who helped one? Like I just want to be able to I just kind of want to be able to like walk in and walk out of it and at least like have it be something shifted here in the positive. Maybe I didn't gain the knowledge to like lose 20 pounds from that post, but I at least like smiled a little bit. I considered like I'd like to talk to that guy a little bit more. I've seen the reflection of something good in this like sea of things that aren't really to my particular liking. And I think that starts with me just not necessarily being affected either way by what's currently out there and kind of like making my own lane. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of where I'm at.
It did answer my question, and there's a lot that I can branch off of from it. First and foremost, I want to give a shout out to our friends Mike Dola and Jeb Stewart Johnston for their podcast. I can't remember the title of it, which is terrible of me. Do you happen to remember it?
Oh man, no.
I got it. I got it. So it's the macro and the mindset.
Yeah,
Um,
I like
and the
it.
reason I'm giving them a shout out is because they've taken a different approach to their conversations. That has been incredibly enlightening for me to just kind of hear how they think through things. And it aligns very closely with, like, you brought up that expression, like, never meet your heroes. And I've had very similar experiences where I'm like, okay, like, there are so many people in this industry that I admire so much, like, I look up to in such a big way. But I've also gotten to know the human side of them, which I really enjoy. And what the human side of someone is that just as I am growing every year, they are too. And just like there's certain things that could have me reacting in a way about, like, is this about me? Or is this about like something else? Like, oftentimes I'll see something, I'm like, is this about me? And then as time goes on, I'll realize, no, nothing to do with me. Like, if anything, maybe this is a time to be a better friend or to be a better supporter or a better this or a better that. And it's just kind of like helped me take a step back. And I think a large part of the reason that their podcast, I've appreciated it so much, is because sometimes they'll hop on there and they'll talk about a book. Sometimes they'll hop on there and they'll get a non-fitness guest. And sometimes they'll hop on there, and because they're both people that I admire, I get to kind of see how they're thinking and how they're learning, and like they're changing their minds on things. It might be like a micro change, something very barely noticeable. But for people who are doing the monotonous same things day in and day out, same routine, to adjust that even slightly magnifies quite substantially. And I would have to say that, like, the fact that life has kind of built boundaries for you probably helps quite a bit. Like for me, I've kind of like simulated boundaries. And so by doing jujitsu, that simulates boundaries where I'm not going to get too worked up about something because I got to get to jujitsu. And my brain doesn't have space to be mad at anything because I'm so tired after jujitsu. And jujitsu puts things in perspective in ways that are is hard to describe. Basically, it just teaches us that like we are not invincible. We don't know everything. We don't have it all figured out. We're just like a speck of dust on this rock, and it's a long journey to progress to a point where it's not a community thing, because like when somebody progresses on a jujitsu team, that is the product of many, many people. Like it's not just about them showing up. It's not the same as like, I mean, everything incorporates a lot of people, but if you compared it to like a physique competition, it could be a lot
Hmm.
easier to understand how that would be like one person or three people. But in my experience with jujitsu, it's like 35 people are involved in my progression. It's the teammates that I like rolling with, it's the professors, it's the competitions, it's who facilitates the competitions, it's my ability to show up, it's having the finances to be part of the community and register for competitions. And so if anything else gets sidetracked, if I get up too upset about things, or if I allow myself to hold on to anger too tightly for too long, it compromises the jujitsu. So it's just, I guess, if somebody's not a parent, they got to do jujitsu. And if they're a parent, they should still do jujitsu. Which brings me to my next thing. Have you ever done a martial art?
So yeah, kind of. Um, I love that you're on this journey, by the way. And also just on the topic, like shout out to Dean Guido and his like
Hell
world
yeah.
championship, right? That's amazing. I want to think that I'm a part of his of his team and his success by like a tenth degree somewhere in there.
Yeah.
It's like no, it's very cool. It's very cool to see. I'm not a part, FYI, not a part of it. Like I had a conversation with you while you walked on the treadmill one time. I feel like that would be my contribution. But yeah, no, it's very cool to see like all that kind of come together. When it comes to me, like yeah, so at some point I did fall into like some amount of BJJ. So this was like post college. I had some roommates who were wrestlers, and it was something that I really enjoyed. I liked it quite a bit. I have some goals of kind of getting back into it because it was one of those things that I think there's certain sports that some of us just feel really comfortable and good in. Like I'm sure someone feels like BJJ is like their workout and it they have to like get the motivation to go. I when I was doing it, I didn't need motivation to go. It was just like, yep, and it's time to leave. I'm gonna head over here now. I have this class that I'm gonna go to, and if I miss it, I'm gonna be real pissed at everyone here. So yeah, that was a fun time. It was a really fun time, and I look to kind of get back to it a little bit.
Good. Good. Because it's just it's helpful. It teaches one about oneself. It's helped me like what it feels like when I'm going through this thought process is almost like I am like looking at my perspective from a different perspective. Like I'm looking at my life from outside and I'm reflecting on like how I've interacted with people, opportunities that I've had, progress that I've made, and it helps me to start to give myself a bit more credit. Where before I would have been more critical of where I was at in life, and I might have carried a bit more negativity, or maybe I was like giving a projection that I didn't know that I was giving. And believe it or not, jujitsu helps me with that,
Hmm.
which is wild. Um, do you have future goals or plans for the next like year, year and a half? Is there things on your radar, things that are on your to-do list?
Yes, yeah. Things change for me very frequently. I have a lot of those, and just like even like leaning into the martial arts side of things, like I'd love to pick up, like I said, love to get back into BJJ, but also would love to get into some amount of Muay Thai and things like that. But that's a little bit further down the line. Like I'm not even looking at like, oh yeah, I'll start that tomorrow. It's like, we'll see like where it kind of leads, but that's kind of the direction that I'm going in. Right now, probably for the next bit, I'm really focusing on growing the business. I have like a bit more motivation that has come in a 5 pound, 12 ounce package. What was she? She wasn't 5 pounds. She was like 6 pounds, like 10 ounces or something like that. But she's been a huge motivation for me to figure out how to be as efficient, as helpful, as impactful with the business as I can. And not just like on a financial side, but on a side where it's like I want to show her something that I've built. I want to be able to say, like, here, look at this, and hopefully you're proud of this thing that I've created and the people that I've been able to impact. And like that says a lot, hopefully, about her and like the character that she has and things like that. So that's probably like long way out, but like I think that a lot of what I'm doing right now sets the foundation for that. We'll likely only be where we are for the next 1 to 2 years and trying to consider what happens there. And until then, it's getting out, it's going to conferences, it's meeting up with really cool people on and offline. It's building out systems for my clients, and it's making sure that every time I'm with my daughter, she smiles, she feels safe, she feels happy, that my wife can see me be happy, and I can also bring a load of happiness into her life. And I'm leaning more into like this very holistic version of who I am. And like authenticity is a buzzword that people use, but trying to make sure that I'm not just myself in every space, but I'm the best version of myself continuously.
Hmm. I mean, I've been using that buzzword heavily. And I was actually recently asked like why I stopped using that word
Mm,
because in the earlier episodes of the lifestyle chase, I would ask people, what is one piece of advice that you'd give to someone to live your most authentic life? And then I would just see like authentic, authentic, authentic. It was in people's marketing, it was in everything. And I was like, they're not even, they're asking the question, somebody's response is something that they think that people want to hear. But
right.
what I want to hear, I want to see somebody crack open and tell me what's up. Like,
Hmm.
I don't need somebody to tell me their pain or um have a hard time answering the question. But like the reason that I have these one-on-one connections is so that I can like really understand like what's this person like and what's this
Hmm.
person like and like what is everybody passionate about? Like what lights this individual up that this individual isn't lit up about. Um, that said, with all of the changes, I think with just like we are so conditioned to consume such a high volume of online content that people almost start to lose themselves.
Mm,
Um, I have the privilege to not only talk to general population, but also a very large volume of coaches and business owners. And confidence is like the low-hanging fruit. Like people can be incredibly capable, incredibly talented, have tons of qualifications. And even if they have made magnificent strides in life, there's something happening with their confidence. And something that I've observed, and because I know so many people, I'm able to kind of call it out, is that people will look at the persona of somebody else's online presence and instantly compare. It's like they're making up what this person's day in the life is like based on that 9 post grid
hmm.
and leaving no room for nuance or like maybe this person took a picture for like 1 minute of their 24-hour day, and that was the 1 minute that they were happy. Or maybe this person recycled some content from 2022
Hmm.
and we didn't know the difference. Like there's just so much more to it. And I've just noticed that people like if you talk about meeting people in person, and that's like the best way to boost morale. And I think Jeb and Mike were talking about that too because they've been really making a big push to go to as many events as they can, like probably more than they have in the past, and they've gone to many, many events.
Hmm.
But it's just as far as quality of life in this industry, quality of connections, opportunities, being able to have those like raw, unfiltered one-on-one conversations where not only are you talking about industry things, but you're also talking about life things. Like, let's say two fitness industry dads sit down together and they're just comparing the sounds of their baby's farts. Like these weird conversations that are only going to happen in an isolated environment, but bring people a sense of connection, relatability, and just calmness, where it's no longer like, okay, foot on the gas, hustle as hard as you can, sacrifice your
Hmm.
family to make all like it's just
Yeah.
that's not it. That's not why we do this. Like we're something you brought up that I think is important is you talked about how you're building something so that you can show your daughter like what you're building. Like this is what you did. And that's powerful. And it reminds me of like once again, Dean Guido, shout out, his journey with jujitsu because he is an athlete at its core. He is very strong, he's fast, he's talented. And he did his football thing, he did his powerlifting thing, and then it was like, okay, well, now he's stepping into a new role and he wanted to have something to show for himself. He didn't want to reflect on like the old days when like he doesn't want to tell the story about when dad used to do this and dad used to do
Hmm.
that. He wants to be about it now. And I definitely take inspiration from that because I'm like, yeah, enough with this like back when I was 20 I did this or back when I was 16 I did this. Like what do you do now? And
Hmm.
so I kind of reframe it for myself. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I've got nieces, I've got some godchildren, a bunch of my friends have kids where I'm kind of like an honorary uncle. Like, there's so many scenarios where I gotta walk my talk. And so I like that you brought that up about business because some people might see it differently. They're like, oh, I gotta pay the bills so that I can support these people. And so I'm gonna do this, like maybe they're working at Walmart or something because it's stable. They know that they got the hours, it works. And if anybody works at Walmart that listens to this, no shade intended. But more so that when you're doing something like that, if it's not lighting you up and giving you a sense of purpose, it can feel very empty. And when it's like, well, what did you build? It doesn't necessarily feel like you built something. But all that said, I am curious if after the last few years, if you have any unique pieces of advice for people based on your lived experience that you think could be helpful to the average listener or viewer of this show. And we can keep it to two pieces of advice.
Yeah. Just kind of venturing off of what you just said. Um, the first part of it, a little bit earlier on, where you're looking around and you're watching what everyone else is doing. I agree. I think meeting people in person allows you to put things into perspective that you've made up in your mind about who they are. Oh, this person is like is rolling in clients, or this person is like they have this massive successful business. And I think that we can both agree that you meet people sometimes who you wouldn't consider successful based on your standard, and then you realize they're some of the most successful people in the room. You meet people who have massive followings, not to say that there aren't folks with massive followings that do really well, but you meet some with huge followings and they're like, seeming like they're getting all of these connections and endorsements left and right, and they're struggling to pay their bills. I think we see both. I've talked to the $1 million business individual who is chained to their desk and can't go anywhere and can't go on vacation and can't be themselves, because if they are themselves, they lose $250,000 that year, because themselves, they who they were at a time was how they built their business. And it kind of sits on the back of that idea, right? So understanding that, I guess the piece of advice is understanding that you don't see the B-roll. You're not seeing even the folks who are like, look at the behind the scenes. The behind the scenes is curated. It's picked. Like
Hmm.
no one's like, here's the unedited version of my life. They're not talking about the stress. And if they are, like it's someone filming themselves crying in a corner, which is, kind of it's
We
cringe.
got to
And
avoid
like
doing that. We got to avoid doing that.
it's the influencers of the world, right? But you're not actually seeing the B-roll. Even the folks who look like they have it all together, you don't know who they are behind their social media profile. Even the folks who are authentic. Do not look at my social media profile and expect that you know who I am. My daughter's face is not on my social media. And that's
Hmm.
like whether it will be eventually or not, I don't know. But like you can't be like, oh, he like I don't know if he cares about his daughter. I never see her. It's like, well, you haven't spoken to me. You're looking at my social media. You can't go on anyone in our industry social media and expect you understand what they do outside of the gym, what they do, how they bond with their family, unless they put all of that out there. And even then, there's stuff that they just don't put out. So I think knowing that, you can start to realize like how much you fill in automatically. The brain is designed to kind of fill in those gaps. Oh, this must be the case and this must be true. And if that picture is there, this must be what happens. I think for a while people would ask me like, hey Samaj, where are you traveling now? This is exciting. Like you're going somewhere else. And I had to consistently correct people and be like, I mean, I'm not on vacation. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm working. I'm
Yeah.
working like 8 to 10 hours a day in a cafe somewhere. And granted, I get to spend a handful of hours like outside and exploring this new place, but there's a trade-off for that. Like it's not all sunshine and daisies. And looking at social media of folks, like just realize it's not all sunshine and daisies. And in many cases, you wouldn't want to trade where you are for where they are, even if it looks like you might. The grass is greener, right? Um, the second thing is this is something I'm probably just learning myself, and it's to just not be in a rush. It's having a bit more patience, and we tell our clients this all the time. It's like we know how fast you could go if you did everything perfectly, but your life is not going to go 100% perfectly. I think, we people are like, yes, balance and 80/20, like that feels right. But yeah, like there's a trade-off for 80/20 as well. There's a trade-off if you don't decide you're going to track every morsel of everything that goes into your mouth. You cook everything. You have a trainer who like pushes you slightly above your actual limits and not your perceived expectations, that you don't have any kind of like worldly connections that would keep you from reaching Super Saiyan 4. Like if you you have to like separate yourself from a lot of things if you're going to be the best, right? And I'm not saying that you don't need relationships. Of course you do. I don't think we're trying to be the best. I think we're trying to be the best version of ourselves and realize that that might mean taking some slower steps. So in my business, I've slowed down. I haven't, been in a rush to say, let's just get everyone who is breathing to come work with me. I'm trying to work with the people that I like. And that's the only way I have to kind of describe that. I'm trying to surround myself with more people that don't necessarily agree with me. I'm not sitting down trying to, surround myself with a bunch of yes men, but folks who are excited to be alive, folks who actually have a little bit more of a story behind them on the client side than just simply, I would like to lose 10 pounds. It's like, why? To fit in my bikini this summer. That's a boring story. I need to know a little bit more about what's going on. If you don't get that, what's going to change about life? Like, are you going to be sad? Why? How deeply? How much does it hurt? How happy are you now? Because if you're trying to lose 10 pounds to make yourself happy, there's something about your sadness that's happening now that I really want to dig up. And those are the folks that I'm surrounding myself with. And I think in a way, that's just not something that I'm going to massively scale because it doesn't really sell. I can't like pinpoint the exact client avatar and I can't package it in this really nice way. So as we're out there and a lot of folks are selling this like 16-week, 90-day business transformation that will get you making 10K, 12K, 15K months in the next 6 months. It's like, sure, that may work, but just realize you may not be happy with the end result. Just like on a fitness plan, if you rush losing 50 pounds in 90 days, could you do it? Sure. but I think your happiness along the way, how much you're willing to trade off matters. Like the last thing I really kind of documented online was a transformation, and I keep those photos and I bring them into client calls because I can easily tell them I can get you there, but here's the trade-off that you have to make at some point along the way. And I've just been able, going back to my one of my first statements, I've been able to identify just what's not worth it. And I think it's really beneficial to identify what's not worth it to trade off, because you will start to trade off things that actually genuinely make you happy. You'll trade off things you actually want. And at some point, you might be able to get them back. You might be able to rekindle that relationship that phased out, or you might be able to get your time back if you've just been simply like stretching yourself completely thin. And it's not to say that there aren't seasons for that, but I think folks are making these permanent trade offs and saying, well, that doesn't matter to me. My relationship doesn't matter to me. My health doesn't matter to me right now. And it's cool if you can rebuild that, but in many cases, I don't think you can. And for those folks, it's really unfortunate. So if you're not willing to give it up forever, the diet thing, if you're not willing to give it up forever, probably don't give it up for now. And just if you're going to really, really understand the risk that you're taking.
I'm hoping people like heard and like absorbed what you said because it's something that people probably need to really comprehend when they're stepping into things. Like there's tons of times where I'll have to talk people out of it's usually I'm like a pro at talking to people out of buying things and talking people out of starting new things. And I'll always try and add in, I'm like, look, I'm a big fan of like getting after it and chasing stuff and pursuing things, but I can see the trade-off and it's not going to do what you think it will do. And what you will lose in doing it is not worth it. And so,
Mm-hmm,
what if you tried this when life was different and maybe you could make it work? Because the sacrifices you'll make will more likely impact you long term than not impact you.
mm-hmm.
But on that note, I want to be mindful of your time. Um, so I will close out this episode, but I will say thank you very much, Samaj, for joining me once again. And I'm sure this won't be the last time. I can basically guarantee that it won't be the last time you'll be back as long as you're willing.
Totally.
But yeah, thanks for coming onto the podcast again.
Chris, it's my pleasure. Love talking to you, my man.
You too.